Thanks everyone for joining us this morning. Good morning and welcome to today's Victorian Energy Upgrades Forum. My name is Kate Simons and I'm the Chairperson of the Essential Services Commission. It's great to be here with you this morning. To start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on all of the lands wherever you are today. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging who may be here today. I'd also like to acknowledge the connection that Indigenous Australians hold to country and culture, particularly at this time of great uncertainty. I'd like to welcome you all to our last Victorian Energy Upgrades Forum in what has been a particularly challenging year for many of our participants. And before I get to some of the agenda this morning, I'd just like to introduce one of my fellow commissioners has joined us this morning. So welcome to Simon Corden, Satish Bajaf from the Essential Services Commission. We have Jeff Safai, our Director of the VEU program at the Commission, and some key team members from VEU as well, Maureen Gooey, Lily Zika, Kate Keating, Andy Sharp and Henry. Today we also have our colleagues from the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, including Sarah Stephen, Helen Sofili, Emma Jacobs and Jack Brown. I understand we have about 200 people who've registered to attend today, including accredited providers, product manufacturers and suppliers, energy retailers and members from the Lighting Council of Australia. So it's great to see so many join us this morning. So I'd like to warmly welcome all of you today, and as we can all attest to, we're certainly living in extraordinary times and I hope you are all been keeping well. But the good news is we have no new coronavirus cases, and with restrictions easing, some aspects of life are certainly getting back to normal, or as we now say, COVID normal. So before we get to the agenda, just some quick housekeeping for this morning. Please be aware we're recording this forum, including any comments and questions made during the forum. This is so we can post the video online for those who are unable to attend today's session. So today's forum's a really important part of our ongoing conversation with you about the Victorian Energy Upgrades program. And these forums are all about us maintaining good communication with you about any changes or upcoming developments. It's also your opportunity to raise issues or ask questions to ensure that there is clarity. Jeff, a little bit later in the agenda, will go over the agenda for you, and he would just like to take a few moments to reflect on the events of 2020, and I'd like to just reflect on the bright future on the horizon for the Victorian Energy Upgrades program. I'd just like to take a moment to thank Jeff and his team for their hard work in delivering the program in difficult and changing circumstances this year. Over this year, we've all had to work hard to understand the implications of the government's restrictions on what upgrades activities were allowed, how they were needed to be carried out to meet the Chief Health Officer's directions. It's very pleasing to note that now we're in a COVID-free state and we are in the last step of the state's reopening. You can now resume delivery of all program activities, so that's very good news indeed. However, it is critical for the integrity of the program that our program participants ensure they deliver program activities, including the generation of activity leads in Australian consumer law. With some consumers experiencing heightened anxiety in engaging again in that face-to-face interactions during this period, it's really critical that those representing the program respect their rights as consumers, and it goes without saying also strictly adhering to the relevant rules. So looking forward, we expect 2021 will deliver you with new opportunities to engage with consumers in delivery of Victorian energy upgrades activities. Certainly the announcements last week by the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio, of the targets for 2022 to 2025, together with the Department's announcement of the electricity emissions factor for the period, sets up a framework for an expanded program over the next 5 years. On top of those announcements, the government's energy efficiency package announcement in this year's Victorian budget was the biggest in state budget history, with $797 million targeting household energy efficiency, $91 million in energy management support for Victorian businesses and community groups, $100 million to increase the energy performance of its own operations, and $10 million for supporting the clean economy workforce. So this announcement represents a total investment commitment of $1 billion. This unprecedented and transformative investment by the government will provide you with the opportunity to grow and expand your service offerings to consumers under the program. So we're committed to working with you and our government colleagues to ensure the Victorian Energy Upgrades program plays a pivotal role in delivering energy efficiency upgrades. To deliver to households and businesses the many benefits of such initiatives, including energy bill savings, better health outcomes, greenhouse gas emission savings, and the creation of many new jobs. And we certainly recognise that the success of the program and to deliver the expanded program targets, we need to work with you to deliver new service offerings to households and businesses. So we look forward to exploring as the program regulator and administrator can help you access new opportunities for growth and expansion to ensure the success of the program in the future. We do need to constantly be vigilant in protecting the good reputation of the program, and as a regulator it's really important that we are both strong and fair. And this is critical to supporting a balanced, transparent and efficient market and a program that operates with utmost integrity. So really, from my perspective, that requires us to continue to work together to recognise and enable innovation, be responsive to changing circumstances. The past year's been a great sign of that. Ensure that real value is delivered to customers and ensure all customers are dealt with respect. So constructive and effective engagement with you will continue to be critical to our work. So as I said before, today is an opportunity to engage with us and our DEL colleagues, and I certainly thank you in advance for your contribution to today's forum, and I look forward to the discussion. Thanks for your time this morning. On that note, I'm going to pass over to Jeff Safai, our Director of the VEU program at the Commission. Thanks very much, Jeff.
Thank you, Kate, for those words. I think it encapsulates the program in 2020 and where we are going in the next few years. So thank you, Kate. Can we have the agenda slide, please? Thanks for that. Today's forum will run for about 1.5 hours over 2 sessions. I firstly will give a presentation on what the program has achieved in 2020. I'll discuss some of the issues that we are dealing with and some of the changes we have made during 2020 and where we stand against our targets. Helen, Verena and Jack from the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, or DELP as we know them, will then say a few words on the recent program announcements and what is in store for 2021. We will then finish this first session by answering your questions. Following questions, we'll have a 40-odd minute break and then we'll have a workshop on switchable lighting products. Next slide, please. We've allowed plenty of time for your questions and these can be forwarded via Slido. The instructions to log on to Slido via the web browser or downloading on the phone app are on the screen. So log on now if you have not already done so and enter the event code #VEU to join the event Victorian Energy Upgrades Forum December 2020. Now, as there will be around 200 people online, we will not be taking questions via the chat function. So please submit all questions via Slido. If a question similar to the one you want to ask is already there, you can vote to promote it up the board. Our moderation panel will read out the questions based on the ones that are most voted on. So now I'll do my review of 2020. Now, this year has been a very difficult year for the Victorian Energy Upgrade Program, as we've all had to alter the way we live and work as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. In combating the spread of the virus, a number of restrictions have been placed on VEU participants that have had a significant impact. I just from the outset want to thank all participants for the way you've responded in these unprecedented times. I've really appreciated the discussions, emails and feedback that I've received from many of you. The restrictions are easing and the program is returning to some semblance of normality under a COVID-19 safe framework. Thank you for playing your part in remaining safe and as we restart parts of the program, staying safe and adhering to the directions of the Chief Health Officer. There are still many VEU matters to work through and we will touch on those today and give you the opportunity to engage with us on those matters. The recent government announcements will provide opportunities as we emerge from the restrictions and the VEU program recovers. In 2021 and onwards, there will be new activities and new targets and a great deal of hard work by all of us as the VEU program moves ahead to 2025. First up today, I'd like to present the numbers for 2020 and then I'll touch on matters the Commission is dealing with. As at 8 December, there were 9.6 million certificates created and 9 million certificates registered, well in excess of the 2020 target of 6.5 million certificates. This provides a good lead into the 2021 program year that also has a target of 6.5 million certificates. During 2020, to date, we've approved nearly 1,350 products, bringing to over 17,000 the number of products we've approved since the start of the program. And in total, there are around 5,400 installers that we have approved. Next slide. As we know, 2020 has not been that simple. There have been many twists and turns, and this is shown in this monthly certificate chart. In January, February and March, the program kicked off the year in spectacular fashion with nearly 2 million certificates created, dominated by Activity 21 lighting and building-based Activity 34 lighting, with some water heating activity as well. Creations peaked in March with 750,000 VEECs created. VEEC creations reduced in April to less than 500,000, and in May they were down to 300,000 certificates, with Activity 21 lighting reducing significantly as the residential restrictions took hold. Interestingly, the building-based lighting numbers increased steadily as some APs were able to transition to this activity. They peaked in June and have maintained an increased level for the year compared to creations in January, February and March. There was also an increase in the water heating activity from June. There are also some creations in a number of other activities, notably in space heating, weather sealing, non-building based lighting, in-home displays and refrigerated display cabinets. Next slide. In 2020, a total of 5.8 million certificates have been registered, with building-based lighting at about 2.7 million certificates and Activity 21 lighting at 2.5 million certificates. Water heating contributed about 285,000 and refrigerated display cabinets topped up 100,000 mark. PBAs came in at about 40,000 certificates, and we expect this to increase significantly in 2021 as more project impact reports submitted to the Commission. There are also and smaller in some of the other activities I noted previously. Next slide. Overall performance numbers since 2000 and next slide, please. Overall performance numbers since 2009 show 4.83 million separate activities with 4.65 million residential addresses and 180,000 business premises. A total of 68 million certificates have been created and 63 million certificates have been registered. During 2020, we have continued our auditing program. We've conducted a limited number of field audit investigations that have recommenced now with the lifting of restrictions. We've also 30,000 certificates this year. We've also responded to about 1,400 stakeholder matters and resolved around 43 complaints. Now I will discuss some specific administration matters. In the products area, we recategorised about 4,000 LED lamps in our product registry that were listed as LED other 240 volts into new lamp type categories. This was done to better reflect the combinations being installed and keep pace with technological developments in this area. In the second half of 2020, we also approved a higher number of products than we had for the same period last year. We are seeing increasing numbers for lighting and weather sealing products, as well as an increasing number of shower applications, including those with extended wells expiry dates. For project-based activities, we have conditionally approved about 280 projects, and there are about 104 projects in our public register. Of these, only 17 impact reports have been submitted at last count, of which 6 are under review. We expect a significant number of impact reports to be submitted in 2021, as the measurement data for a number of projects is assessed by APs. Impact reports are completed. The Commission has been gearing up for this increase in submissions, and we are waiting the bow wave to come. An area I wanted to discuss is the audit of PBA projects. Basically, why do we do them? We do them, can we go back to the previous slide, please? We do them because of Victorian, so that the Commission gains assurance that the Act and the regulatory requirements. Section 6.1 of the PBA guidance document states that we will conduct audit on a risk basis. Currently, we have audited all 11 projects that have reached the certificate creation stage. However, some have been identified with a couple of some issues have been identified with a couple of projects that have resulted in some changes to the submitted impact reports. Several matters have arisen about the audits. Firstly, the length of time they take, about 40 days after the certificates have been created. And secondly, about our audit approach that includes discussing the project with the end-use consumer. In relation to the time taken, we have reviewed our process and implemented a streamlined approach that will reduce the time from creation to registration. Additionally, the learnings from the first audit are being used to determine our risk-based approach going forward, especially where projects are similar. Going forward, many projects will not be audited prior to registration as we gain the confidence in the processes employed by APs for the specific projects that they undertake. However, for those projects not audited prior to registration, the Commission may conduct post-registration audits as required or as part of routine AP audits, or if a matter comes to our attention that requires an investigation. In relation to discussions with end users, contacting end users has been our approach since the start of the program in 2009, and we will be maintaining this approach for PBA. Work is underway to update section 6.1 of the PBA guidance document to clarify our PBA approach, and this will be published shortly. Next slide. Now back briefly to lighting products. Many of you will be aware we are conducting a consultation to review switchable lighting products. We have a concern with these products in that with many, the wattage setting is easily switchable. As a regulator, this is a matter of concern as it can be difficult to gain assurance that the claimed wattage is being maintained by the end user. Some of the products that we have identified have external switches or can be remotely operated to change the wattage. And the concern is that these could easily be changed by the consumers after installation. If this occurs, certificates may be over-awarded for these installations. We've received some feedback that some of these products are very difficult to change after leaving the factory. We've also received feedback that we are moving too quickly on this matter and that the changes were retrospective. We also received comments on how the Commission may gain the necessary assurance. We're considering all of these issues. To be clear, the basis of the consultation in early October presented the Commission's position and about existing products being transitioned to the highest wattage. We sought feedback on an appropriate transition about future applications for these multi-wattage products. Our position was that the highest wattage setting would be accepted. Based on the feedback received, we have reviewed our preferred position and we're conducting a workshop later today to go through matters before finalising our decision for the various types of multi-wattage products available. I look forward to your input later today. Now onto the compliance matters. Can I have the next slide, please? As I mentioned at every forum, the Commission needs to be assured that the certificates claimed by APs are valid. We have provided guidance for APs to collect and retain information that will assist us gaining that assurance. When requested, you're required to provide the evidence to us. The quick provision of the requested information means we can assess it to gain the necessary assurance and progress certificates to registration. If you cannot readily provide the information, then we may need to investigate the claim, and this can take some time, especially if we have concerns about the installation. A specific area that we have found challenging over the last few years, and has again arisen through the lockdown period, is our concern about what was the actual baseline environment when installation activity takes place. The program requires certificates can only be awarded for the replacement of lights that were part of the original baseline environment. To me, that seems simple enough. Old lights replaced by new lights. All we ask is evidence from the installation address that clearly shows that the old lights were removed and replaced from that particular address. This seems a very simple task on paper. We've been reviewing a number of problematic installations over the last period, which have been challenging to investigate due to the movement restrictions. In these circumstances, the provision of clear information would have made the review much easier. We have conducted a large number of desktop and phone audits, and these have identified some matters for further investigation. In response to our concerns, the Commission is strengthening the evidence requirements for lighting installations so that we can better identify the original baseline environment being replaced. We are currently consulting on increasing our evidence requirements for certain lighting activities, and changes will be communicated shortly. One item I wanted to note was highlighted by a consumer during a recent site visit. The matter concerns work safety. I want to emphasise that irrespective of the upgrade location, whether it is at a residential, commercial, warehouse or at a farm premises, APs and all OH&S obligations are met. I particularly want to emphasise that working from height requirements must be adhered to. Standing precariously on hay bales is not appropriate. In relation to relevant entities, our audit of 2019 compliance year obligatory surrender certificates found that one energy retailer had a certificate shortfall, and a certificate shortfall penalty notice was issued to that retailer. This matter is now finalised. Now on to door knocking and telemarketing matters. Next slide, please. As the Commission and the Department have noted in our recent communications, door knocking as a form of lead generation is now allowed in the program, and we all want this to run smoothly to benefit the program. To ensure this occurs, I want to emphasise the obligations on all VEU participants and third party operating on their behalf. You must all comply with the provisions of the Australian Consumer Law. This requires you to tell consumers your name, the name and address of the AP the lead generator represents. You must show an ID. You must describe the purpose of the visit, and you can only door knock at certain times on Mondays to Saturdays. Door knocking is not allowed on Sundays or public holidays, and you must not knock on a door with a do not knock sign. More generally, you or your third parties must ensure you inform the consumer that the VEU program is a voluntary government program, and you must not make false or misleading claims such as you work for or on behalf of the Victorian government. Significant penalties may be applied for breaches of the Australian Consumer Law. The Commission also requires all APs undertaking installations under weather sealing, shower rows, residential lighting and in-home display activities to provide the Commission with details of the service level agreement you have with your lead generator and sales organisations that clearly shows your relationship with these organisations. We require this information for both door knocking and telemarketing lead generators. I'd like to thank those who have already submitted this information. In addition, every Monday, APs are required to provide the Commission with the lead generator and sales organisations you have used to undertake door knocking for the previous week and for the coming week. You must also provide the postcode you are targeting. This process is not new, as it is a recommencement of the process we started in June 2019 for lighting activities. The change is we now have extended the process to include in-home displays, weather sealing and shower rows activities. In relation to telemarketing, you and your third-party lead generators must comply with the ACL and also comply with the Australian Communication and Media Authority Telemarketing Industry Standard 2017. In particular, telemarketers are obliged to provide the consumer with specific information when asked, including how you or your lead generators obtained the consumer's telephone number and provide the consumer the name of the AP being represented. We are receiving complaints about telemarketers not adhering to these obligations, so I ask you to ensure your telemarketers adhere to these industry standards. The Commission will continue to work closely with DELP to monitor the actions of accredited persons and lead generators, including undertaking additional audits and referring consumer reports of observed non-compliance to the appropriate agencies. Now to our registry team activities. Next slide, please. At the beginning of the restrictions, the registry team streamlined its validation process to ensure that certificates were processed quicker. This streamlining has led to 64% of all certificate batches being processed ahead of our target. A great effort by the registry team, so well done. Upon recommencement of activities, the registry team required and checked that all APs had COVID-safe plans. We did this to emphasise to APs the need to have COVID-safe plans in place prior to recommencing work, and to ensure APs understand their obligations and the consequences if worksafe or COVID-19 authorised officers checked on them. During the team received a high number of applications for new accreditations, including for PBAs. The team also received applications from existing APs once you expand their work to include other VEU activities. The team is working through these applications. Finally, as we near the holiday period, we'll have a limited number of people on leave between Christmas, limited number of people available during the 24th of December and the 3rd of January 2001. During this period, no registrations will be completed. We recommence assessments on the 4th of January 2021. Now to matters undertaken by our project teams. Next slide, please. During 2020, we've released 7 COVID-19 bulletins to inform participants of the program status in relation to the directions of the Chief Health Officer. The last bulletin was released on the 2nd of December. Among many program updates we have released, a new certificate creation form for public lighting upgrades, activity 27. We've implemented changes to prevent the submission of certificate claims with invalid lamp ballast combinations and or invalid asset lifetime references. Reduced our requirement for product applications under building-based lighting upgrade, where the product has already been approved either under a public lighting upgrade or a non-building-based lighting upgrade. We also made changes to the lighting product application guide to reflect updated requirements under the lighting LM80 and TM21 test report standards. We published a 2019 VEU performance report. We participated in the steering group in the re-accreditation of the Victorian Registration and Qualifications Authority retrofitting course for energy and water efficiency. We continued the development of our new IT system on the Microsoft Dynamics 365 platform. This project is progressing slower than expected, and we're estimating the new system to be available during the first half of 2021. Prior to the release, we'll be reaching out to participants to trial the new portal, and we'll be running sessions to introduce the system. The upgrade will do everything the current system does in a new Microsoft way. So its look and feel will be different, so watch out for this development as 2021 progresses. We've also commenced planning for all changes to meet the requirements of the VEU program expansion. In addition, we also released our stakeholder engagement plan, which will guide our interactions with you in 2021. As many here would know, the fridge and freezer destruction activity, a mainstay since the start of the program. I'm going to take this opportunity to thank APs who worked in this area, an integral activity to remove energy inefficient and ozone depleting products. As a then audit manager in 2010, I have a great memory of visiting an AP in Maddox Road, Newport, to view the removal of these gases from a number of fridges. So again, thank you to those participants in the fridge destruction activity for your great contribution to the program. And finally, amongst all this, the Commission is moving its office to 570 Burke Street, Melbourne. I've been told that all our equipment is there, but we're not. We're still working from home. Plans are being made for the gradual return to the office, and we will keep you all informed of that. Now to my final slide. Next slide, please. I'll finish up my presentation this morning with the run rate chart we've been showing since our early forums. It shows for most of the entirety of the program, the number of certificates available has exceeded the target. The chart in millions of weeks shows where we are today and the scope and extent of work we all need to do to meet the opportunities ahead. I believe the chart also illustrates that whenever the program has presented opportunities, adjusted and thrived, and I'm sure the same will occur as we embark on the next phase of the VEU program. So on that note, I'll finish my presentation. So thank you. I'd now like to introduce my colleagues from DELP who will discuss the program changes that were recently announced. So first up, we have Helen Cerfelli. So I'd like to welcome Helen to the forum now. Thanks, Helen.
Many thanks, Jeff. Hi, everyone. And thanks, Jason, for the slides. Thank you, everyone, for joining us during this very busy end of year period. And before we get into our updates, I wanted to start by providing an overview of what DELP will cover today and give a bit of a recap of the many developments during 2020. Next slide, thanks. I'll get right into it. You can go on to the next slide. So while the timeline slide's coming up, you'll see that as Kate and Jeff have already described, 2020 is the year that did not play out as expected when we kicked off consultation last December. So on the slide on the screen, you'll see the purple conventional steps in the public consultation that occurred. Stakeholders were invited to share their views on the proposed changes from 4th of December 2019 until 31st of January 2020 in relation to future VEU targets and the key program changes. On the 11th of December, we held a session attended by over 200 people to discuss these matters in a public forum, and the department received a combined total of 82 submissions for the target and lighting consultations from peak bodies, accredited providers, industry and members of the public. And these very much inform the announcements that you've heard in subsequent months on lighting changes, on the targets, emissions factors and penalties. But in April, the impacts of coronavirus took hold, as you are all extremely aware. It affected consumers, activities, businesses and the VEU market, and it delayed the government's announcement of future targets as it worked to respond to the pandemic. I'd like to acknowledge, add my acknowledgement to Kate and Jeff about how participants have handled the difficult year we've had, the impact and suffering that coronavirus has caused for many businesses that participate in the VEU program, and also thank a lot of people on the line today for your perseverance and engagement. I know many of you here today worked with us and the ESC to manage coronavirus risks and at the same time get your head around understanding and responding to restrictions and the reopening roadmap. So the blue items on the timeline show these many key decision points related to activity suspension and lifting, and it highlights that major challenge and uncertainty that coronavirus presented this year. Though it's a year of great uncertainty, it's also a year where government has shown great commitment to the VEU program, as highlighted by Kate. So this is not marked on the slide, but along with the key announcements, the black items, we had major developments in terms of receiving significant funding for the VEU program through the 2020-21 state budget. The budget release with some ongoing funds, and Minister D'Ambrosio has spoken publicly many times confirming the core role that VEUs can have in meeting Victoria's energy affordability, energy transition and climate change goals. And as Kate mentioned, this is just one element of major funding for energy efficiency and energy management in this year's budget, with VEU being supported by major initiatives such as a $31 million fund for large energy users to improve energy efficiency, demand management and make capital upgrades, and further major funding for household equipment replacements through rebates and building standards. Today, following the announcements made today consultation, but particularly sharing proposals for new activities that are going to increase certificate supply. And with that, I'll hand over to Jack from the department to provide more detail on that now.
Appreciate it. So I'm Jack Brown, Manager Energy Efficiency Technologies at TAL. I'm going to speak to you today about some new and revised activities in the VEU program. I'm sure many of you will be interested in hearing about. So first up, letting you know that we're going to make some changes to the measurement and verification, or M&V method. We're going to remove the export limit. These changes will be released later today. The export limit removal is the most requested change by M&V stakeholders and participants. And it basically means where previously energy generated on site wasn't able to be exported past a measurement boundary, the change will allow this. So peaks will be able to be created or reduced grid demand, but export energy does not create peaks. There's no limit on the export volume imposed by the VEU program, but note there may be limits imposed by sites, the NSP, so something to be aware of when you're considering projects. Existing projects may apply for a variation to allow export. Encourage you to ask that question of the ESC and of DELWIC if necessary. I'm really pleased to announce this and the team expect that it will not only encourage more M&V projects, but it also means that the VEU program is assisting in the energy transition that's going on in Victoria and creating a cleaner grid. So that's a great start, great announcement to kick off on. So the second change or thing for M&V is that there will be non-routine adjustments available to allow for the impacts of COVID-19 on energy data collection. And that includes things like occupancy levels, changes in production and hours of operation, things like that might have been affected by COVID. We know that COVID has affected many sites with current or future M&V projects, just as it's affected basically everything. I'm talking to you over Zoom rather face-to-face at the moment. Many sites would be ineligible to create certificates under the current M&V specifications, and we have worked with industry experts, including people that are probably in the audience, to create a series of non-routine adjustments or NRAs for eligible M&V projects. Thanks for those that provided input. It was really useful. Sites must prove that they have been affected by the impacts of COVID-19, and using the NRAs will enable VEU creation at a reduced incentive level. Note, some projects may choose to delay VEU creation until the site has recovered from the impacts of COVID-19. We'll release more guidance on this in early 2021, early next year, and hopefully that will help with M&V projects who have been challenged by COVID. Next slide, please, Jason. All right, so announcements that I'm sure everyone's been keen to hear on for some time. New activities. Very pleased to announce the release of 3 issues papers on actually brand new VEU activities. This is something that we've been working on for some time, and I really like on this. An issues paper explains an activity idea, basically. So it normally includes questions for stakeholders, and what the feedback we get fills in the blanks in our understanding, assists in deciding whether we go forward with the activity idea. So just to want to reiterate that, an issues paper doesn't mean a new activity is going to be introduced, rather it is us exploring an idea. So we've got 36 existing activities in the program. I'm sure you've all heard me say that before. We're always looking at new areas that may provide pools of opportunity and new activities that might be useful. And today I'd like to tell you about the first thing, which is first potential activity, which is smart thermostats. So what does that actually mean? What is a smart thermostat? So smart, we're defining as a device that is connected to a communications network, and normally that's via Wi-Fi. Smart thermostats, or a smart device, allow consumers to monitor and control their environment from their smartphone or other networked devices. We've started to see the smart kind of devices come into the program through in-home displays, particularly products that can connect to smartphones, and we know that consumers are pretty keen on this, and we think potentially smart thermostats are another activity that could be interesting to consumers. So there's additional benefits for consumers: convenience, comfort, control that comes from a smart device. Smart thermostats are focused on improving energy efficiency in home heating and cooling systems, either ducted or non-ducted air conditioners. So smart thermostats can produce energy savings through behavioural responses or non-behavioural responses, depends on how they're set up. And they don't seem to be very common in Victoria as yet, but they're significantly developed overseas, particularly in the US and Europe. So in the US, smart thermostats, they're also the most common approach to air conditioner demand response, with the Energy Star program publishing criteria on this. So I know demand response is particularly interesting to many people. This is us dipping our toe in the water, so to speak, through an activity about how demand response might be enabled. There's questions in the issues paper on this, and I encourage you to have a look at those and respond to them. So that's smart thermostats. Next issues paper, mouthful, or EMIS for short. So these are installed in commercial buildings. Functionality of an EMIS can range from basic energy monitoring and reporting right through to analysing, guiding, control of systems. So they can be the brains of a commercial building. We understand there are a range of different types of EMIS available on the market, commercial buildings at the moment. And part of what the paper does is kind of put each of these types into categories. So basic optimization product. So I'm not going to explain any more detail than that. I encourage you to look at the paper, outlines what we're also doing through this EMIS paper is testing a new way of VEU creation, which we're terming a hybrid deemed and measurement approach. So This, in brief, would involve providing evidence of energy use for 1 year or multiple years from either metering or billing data, creating beaks for a single year on deemed savings using a deemed approach, and then a review of whether energy savings occurred after 1 year or year one using a simple measurement approach, and then allowing creation of multiple years of certificates if savings occurred. So that's an interesting, exciting place for us to be in as well. If we can get that kind of hybrid approach up, that could help us simplify M&V and kind of add more flexibility to deemed approaches. So have a look at the paper for some more detail if you're interested. Next slide, please. Third paper on a new activity is on hot pipe lagging. Lagging is insulation, for those that don't know. This will probably be a simple, relatively low-cost activity that's focused on improving heated pipework efficiency. We know that lagging insulation reduces heat loss in these systems, often accounts for 10 to 12% of the system's fuel consumption. So that could be quite a useful activity. Key questions in the paper about the standards for installation and what product features the lagging needs. So we do already have 6 existing gas efficiency activities in the program. We think that this hot pipe lagging activity will be a useful complementary measure and maybe provide people with something they can go to a site and say, I can lag your pipes on, and now I can also upgrade your gas boiler. And finally, we're releasing an issues paper with draft regulations and specifications for a potential new cold room activity. We originally consulted on this activity in August 2019. We received supportive responses from stakeholders and of new refrigeration upgrades that we've included in that paper, modifying the cold room refrigeration equipment to use an electronic expansion valve, and installation of appropriate control technology, which can automatically control the superheat of the refrigeration system. That's the first activity. Second, installation of an upgraded refrigeration system, which contains at least 3 components of a high efficiency refrigeration system. And then finally, for a few different variations of that, we hope that it could be a really useful activity for cold rooms. There's about 65,000 of them in the state, we understand. They range from florists or bottlers right through butchers, etc. So it could be some a good deemed activity. That is the deemed activity. The draft regs and specs will help with legal drafting. And basically, this is how an activity moves from an idea to a realised activity and eventually comes into the regulations and the program. So the consultation papers will come out later today, and we will have the consultation open until the 5th of Feb next year. Don't be too worried if straight after the forum you can't find the consultation papers. They will come out today before the end of the day. All right, next slide, please. So that's the new activities. Now, revision of existing activities, because we have quite a few that are already in the program. We are DALP. We are continuously monitoring and considering existing activities and also discussing whether they need review. There's a range of factors an activity needs a review, including how additional it is, how fit for purpose it is, what our policy priorities are, what internal resources are available, discussions with the ESC, changes in standards, etc. So there's a whole bunch of things we think about, and also you come to us as stakeholders and kind of ask us to review things. So we need to be transparent with everyone, with all you in this meeting, on what activities we're planning on reviewing. And for 2021, we will review the following, noting we may review others, but it is our decision on whether things are reviewed or not, and taking into account those factors that I raised before. So things that
Hi, everyone. So, targets and emissions factors. So we recently announced these, and I'm going to keep it fairly brief, and then we'll look to answer any of the questions that you have that come up later. So basically, we've now got the targets for 2021 to 2025. They go up every year by 0.2 million certificates. But at the same time, we have those emissions factors that are decreasing. I will point out that 2021 change in the emissions factor will commence from 31st of July, so not from June. There was a bit of confusion there for a brief period, but it's definitely 31st of July. And so what we've done since we first came out with this proposal to reduce the emissions factor when we released the RIS late last year now, is we've actually revised those initial emissions factors to enable us to have a smoother trajectory to that growing ambition under the program. And so you can see that through the graph at the bottom of the slide. The old emissions factors that we originally came up with are in pink here, and as you can see, it meant that during from 2020 to 2022, there was a quite strong increase in ambition, and there's a lot of comments about what that would mean given that we were also proposing to move to new types of activities, how that would all work. And so what we've done now is we now have a smoother transition, which is demonstrated by the blue bars. And so every year, and especially in those first few years, we go up in terms of the amount of energy savings that are being delivered in a more linear fashion. And that will mean that the transition to those new activities that Jack was talking about is also going to be easier to manage, and easier for all of you in terms of participants. So I'll leave it on that. And next slide, please. Okay, and so shortfall penalties also announced these. So contrary to what was in the RIS, we aren't raising them by as much as we had proposed. Now, initially, the numbers we were looking at, they represented the benefit that was lost to society. And so they were quite a bit higher because there are quite strong benefits to society when we deliver each certificate. But we've also recognised through the consultation and through the replies from retailers that there has been quite high and good compliance under the program. And so what we've decided is that we will lower those, especially acknowledging that at times they can be used where prices might land. Now, on that though, we have made this comment before, and I think it's important to make it again. These penalties operate as a price ceiling, but they're not, because we really don't want them to be hit, will lead, and they really should be high enough that they don't impede the natural market dynamics, which involved, I suppose, prices changing over time. Now, we have also talked before about certificate prices and the fact that the emissions factor changing will change that. But we're confident that those shortfall penalties will allow us to manage that process well. Now, in terms of the P announced to every single person, so I'll make sure I point it out, the PBA emissions factors are slightly different. So for the forward creation, we'll be using the 10-year average emissions factors, and that's from the implementation start date. So a lot of you specifically asked about that in your consultation responses. And then when we're looking at the annual creation through the M&V method, we then use in terms of overall the change, we just want to point out that we will continue to be technology neutral. So there are a lot of electrification upgrades, as the Minister pointed out, that will hopefully occur as part of the program, but we also continue to support gas efficiency, larger biomass and hydrogen solutions. So the program really is technology neutral, and it tends to promote those activities that end up being most economic, and whatever that is, we will promote, and there's certainly opportunities there for a lot of those larger projects as well. There's a lot of other matters that stakeholders raised as part of the consultation. Now, we are going to provide some more information to follow up on that and to conclude, I suppose, with our stakeholders on that, and we'll follow up on that in the coming weeks. So you can expect to hear a little bit more on some of those matters that you might still be waiting to hear on. Fairly soon. One of the things I will tie off on, and if we can go to the next slide, that would be great, is the large, so can we go to, yep. So is the large energy users exemption proposal. So that was, sorry, can we go one back again? Yeah. So that particular proposal was one that was tied up with the targets policy, but we have decided, given COVID, that we're going to take a little bit more time. So that is a process being handled by Gabrielle Breen and the team, so feel free to send her some specific questions. But basically, we haven't made any sort of implementation on at the start of next year, and you'll certainly hear a little bit more on that. But if you do have any specific questions, or you want to talk a little bit more and have particular views you want to share, they can still definitely be taken into account. So please email Gabrielle Breen or any member of the DELP team. In terms of another thing in that space is the Business Recovery Energy Efficiency Fund, which has been announced. And that's just something we want to point out. There's 31 million in grants for energy efficiency, demand response and energy management available there. So please do check that out if you do, if you are interested in those kind of large activities. And on that note, I think that's mostly the answer in terms of what's already on Slido, because I think the answer is really, we are still landing that and we are still discussing that. So please make sure to get in touch if you want to know more on it. But certainly still working on the same, I suppose, policy idea, just making sure we get it right and we have a bit more time to talk to businesses that have been impacted by COVID. Okay, I think that's it in terms of me. I'll pass on to Helen.
Many thanks, Verena. I'm just going to close quickly, conscious of time, by summing up the next steps over the coming months to operationalise the changes that have been announced that we've gone through today. On targets, the 2021 target is equal to the 2020 target. Accordingly, the greenhouse gas reduction rates will remain the same, with the current greenhouse gas reduction rate automatically rolling over to 2021, and that will happen on the 31st of May next year. Given the delays from coronavirus and the fact targets were not announced and set in regulations by the 31st of May because of the COVID delays, the department will make a minor amendment to the VEU Act to implement the new targets. And this amendment process is already underway, and the department expects to have new targets made by September 2021. The shortfall penalties announced on 8th of December were made through regulations earlier this week, with gazetting to follow soon. And the department will enact changes to emissions factors by amending VEU program technical specifications made by the Secretary of our department. These new emissions factors, as Verena mentioned, will commence from 31st of July next year, with the annual changes taking effect from 31st of January thereafter. As Jack discussed, the potential new activities released today are going to undergo consultation in coming months to be introduced later next year, and you can expect more new activities coming through the pipeline. Importantly, just before I close, I wanted to give people reassurance. I'm very aware of the concern and the interest on coronavirus uncertainties and VEG prices, and we're closely monitoring VEG prices and market liquidity with the ESC. I know we've had some conversations with some liable entities and others over recent months. We'll continue to do that and welcome your approach to discuss these matters as all these elements roll out in 2021. And relatedly, we recognise the continued concern about managing impacts of coronavirus to date and the continued risk it presents. And we'll continue to work and communicate with you as rapidly as we can on this going into the new year. And as we've attempted during this year to connect the measures and communications for our energy efficiency and energy management sector into the broader action on this across government. Thank you once again for your input on the program in 2020, and we look forward to working with you in 2021. And with that, I will leap across to responding to a few of the questions on Slido. There are a couple I'll acknowledge first before passing to Ray. As Verena said, really keen to hear your and views and understand impacts of coronavirus on large energy users, and will be on, so please get in touch with the department about that. Mitch from PowerPal, thank you for your question. Mitch asked, what's the process to submit suggestions for new products that might be suitable for installations as part of an existing prescribed activity, and for the department to review and consult on those suggestions? In terms of submitting products for approval, which meet existing specifications, they should be sent through the registry portal. In terms of new activities, as Jack outlined, our issues paper are going to be a key step to consulting and receiving suggestions. We might also hold targeted conversations in addition to the public discussion on the coming months, and we welcome ideas for new activities on an ongoing basis through to our email address at energy.upgrades@delp.vic.gov.au. Also note the question on refrigeration destruction and the continued interest in the activity. Jeff had covered in his presentation that this activity ceased on the 10th of December. I will pass to the ESC on the next question regarding a concern about cyber security. Considering the high level of VEGs sitting in the register, both registered and unregistered, there's a question about the security and the implications for both APs and retailers and potential cyber theft. Jeff, I'll pass to you on that one.
Yeah, thanks for that, Helen. Look, this has been well, I won't say it's an issue, but it's been an item and a matter that we've been, sort of looking at for a number of years, really since the start of the introduction of our portal back in 2011. Initial testing was done back then and has continued to be done on a regular basis. So we have a number of protocols that currently use, and the current system has security based on the Microsoft Security.net protocols, and that manages all the transactions on our webpage. Now, all of the transfers that are done are encrypted, and we regularly do vulnerability, or as it's sometimes called, penetration testing, and the system has achieved that and passed those with flying colours in the past. But it is something that we're constantly aware of. We're hearing, these stories. A lot of attacks are happening and probably increasing. So we're always looking at ways to improve the system. But currently, with the testing that we've outsourced that we have carried out, we think the system is safe. But we're doing further investigation on that. Now, with respect to the IT system system development that's occurring now, understanding that on the Microsoft, it's the Microsoft Dynamics 365 framework, that there's improved security features on that as well. So again, in relation to that, we're confident that the system is quite well from a security perspective, but it's a constant sort of thing that we're looking at.
Thanks, Jeff. Next question, also for the ESC. Will the VEU be releasing additional guidance confirming VEU's definitions of the new lighting product categories?
Is Andy there? I think Andy is best to answer this question.
Yep. Yeah, my video doesn't want to start though. Yeah, so I guess thanks for that feedback. Obviously there is guidance at the moment, but you know, I take your point that it could be made more clear. So we'll update our guidance on that at the next opportunity to just make that clearer. If there's something specific that you want to know about, feel free to contact us through the usual channels.
Thanks, Andy. Quick response to a question about whether slides from today will be made available. The answer is yes to that. One further question to pass to the ESC from Watley. With regard to PBA audit process, can you give guidance on expected audit timelines for the streamlined process versus the 42 days previously targeted?
Yeah, I'll answer the question. So look, this has been an area that we've been in discussion internally and with a few of the PBA APs over a little bit of time. As I mentioned in the presentation, we are streamlining the approach. The average time has been about 40 days after the creation of certificates, and we haven't sort of set a firm KPI for that, but I would like to see something in the order of around 20 days. But as I also mentioned in the presentation, what we are doing is learning from the processes that we've currently got. So there's only been 11 activities PBA have gone through, learned a lot from that, and so it's 40 now, and we're looking at getting that down to 20.
Thanks, Jeff. Next question I'm going to pass to my colleague, Emma. The question is from Alan Wayne. Can you claim LGCs for the exported portion outside of the measurement boundary while still claiming VEECs for electricity consumed within the boundary?
So the short answer is no. You can either claim VEECs or LGCs. Now, the slight complexity is that Clean Energy Regulator has a policy where they allow people to claim both STCs and LGCs for the same system, so treat the portion under 100 kilowatts as a small scale system and the portion over 100 kilowatts as a large scale system. We will align with that same requirement, so you can claim STCs and VEECs, but not, or STCs and LGCs, but you can't claim LGCs and VEECs. Those are either or.
Thanks, Emma. A question that I'm going to pass to my colleague Jack about requirement changes related to water heating activities.
Thanks, Helen. So I did mention there would be an update to the water heater standards. We're aware of that in government. We have roles on standards committees and the like. We aren't able to say anything further except to note there will be changes. As soon as we can circulate those changes and outline what they mean to the VEU program, we will. But if you have particular interest in water heaters and the standards changes, I encourage you to look at the standards.
Thanks, Jack. A couple of other PBA related questions. One from Nicholas at Carbon Blue. Why is the PBA forward creation emissions factors averaged over 10 years, but not 10-year forward creation deemed lighting? And a question about how the average will be calculated since emissions factors go only to 2025 as currently announced.
Yeah, so all of the emissions factors that we've announced are actually 10-year forward averages. So what we want to do is be able to account for how the energy system is going to be changing over the next, over the coming period of time. So the emissions factors for deemed activities and PBA activities will be a 10-year forward average. The only exception to that will be if you're doing annual creation or top-up, where you're claiming for savings that have already occurred. And in that case, you'll be allowed to use the NGA emissions factors, which are the factors that the Commonwealth use for accounting for their emissions and savings that have occurred in the previous year. Back to you, Helen. Or was there another question on PBAs?
We've also got the question, I think we might have covered it, also from Nicholas Carbon Blue asking about the 100 kilowatt plus solar PV deemed activity.
Yeah, so look, that's certainly something that we're thinking about. We wanted to make this change in to the M&V provisions to allow this activity to happen as quickly as possible. We'll continue to think if the M&V activity is creating barriers, we'll look at if there's a deemed activity or a simplified version. But for now, we are focusing on getting as many activities out there as possible, and the change to M&V was allowed people to get access to the incentives more quickly.
Thanks, Emma. There's a question about COVID impacts. So I touched on this at the end of my presentation. The question is, considering COVID is not over, can DELP confirm whether if activities were again suspended, would they reduce targets? I think this is something we will continue to speak about very openly with you next year. We mentioned simultaneously the desire to talk about tracking both impacts of COVID and other changes on certificate prices, but market liquidity. So we're always open to having conversations and particularly understanding your own circumstances and any data you have about impacts. And if there are concerns about timing of acquitting your liability, you can individually approach the Essential Services Commission. But the general principle of coronavirus restrictions and the flow through to activity suspension will be in line with a whole of government position on whether or not similar activities are allowed. I might see there's a question at the top about sensor products. Andy, Jeff or Maureen, would you like to make any comment on this about there are a lot of sensor products doing nothing but claiming extra VEECs and wondering about check?
Yes, thanks for that. Like, there's obviously a number of products which are installed which have multiple features, and whenever a product does have a multiple feature, you get increased certificates, and the sensor lighting product is one of those. And so they are approved and appropriately approved under the scheme. They need to meet certain criteria, but it's fair to say that with some of those which are easily switched on or off, there is the potential for that over awarding. So we do go and audit those particular items, and we're fully aware that you know, with some of those behavioural things that they can change. So as I said, they're appropriate products. They're installed meeting the requirements of the Act, but that there could be an issue about whether certificates are being over awarded if they're not switched on all the time. So it's something that we've sort of been aware of, we've been looking at, but there hasn't been any significant sort of information that we've basically been forward or seen through our audits for us to make any changes with respect to that.
Thanks, Jeff. A quick question from Pete at PowerPal about where you will be able to find the new and revised activities webpage. Jack mentioned it is not yet live. It will be going live by close of business today, and the issues papers will be published on Engage Victoria for you to download and provide your responses back through there. we're going to wrap very shortly. So I appreciate you staying over time with us today, and we will welcome any further questions to be provided to energy.upgrades@delp.vic.gov.au or via the Essential Services Commission, and really appreciate your contributions today. Jeff, anything else to add before we break for the workshop?
Yeah, just wanted to thank everyone for their attendance today at returning our plenary session. A lot of great questions that have come able to get, because we've only got a few more minutes there, so we'll endeavour to get the responses to those at some appropriate time if we can. Just want to say a few thank yous. There's been a big team behind the scenes putting this event together today, and we will continue with the workshop in about sort of half an hour or so. But I just especially want to just thank Jason Cox, who's been sort of the engine room in putting together today's sessions. So thanks, Jason, for your great efforts in coordinating us all. A bit like herding cats this morning. You've done a fantastic job. So thanks to Jason and all the other team members at the department and also the ESC in getting the forum together today. And also thank you, participants. We couldn't see any of you today, so it's a bit different than sort of speaking in front of you in a theatre. So I do look forward to getting back to that mode of presentation, hopefully in the not too distant future. So I'd just like to sort of wrap up the session with those comments. And as I said, in about half an hour, we'll convene for the workshop on switchable products. So thanks again.